everyone. Today is a big name, and it's one that many of you have said along the way, I can't believe that you're going through rock history and you're not touching on Elvis. I mean, Elvis is the king of rock and roll, and you just can't ignore him. Well, I won't go into the reasons why I've waited until now for this, but unlike Freddie Mercury, Elvis is actually a name that I know and have known for quite a while. I can't say that I've listened to his music. It's very likely that maybe I heard something that he was singing somewhere along the way because, hey, I live in Tennessee, right? But I haven't intentionally listened to his music for sure. I do know a fair bit about him, not all the details, but Memphis is, of course, is where Graceland is, and so he's not a foreign figure to me. Now, of course, if I even know the name Elvis, well, he is the king of rock and roll. And if we were to sit down and read a biography write-up or go through his accolades and achievements and awards, I'm sure we would be sitting here for possibly hours, at least way too long for a first listen. And actually, that is the reason that Vlad has chosen not to give a little write-up about the performer here, Elvis Presley, because it would get to be too much, and this is a very well-known name. So I'll go do a bit of reading later, but he has given me a little bit about this particular song. So let's see what that is, and then we'll listen. Elvis Aaron Presley, that was his full name. Believe it or not, he had a full name. Most commonly known as Elvis, was an American singer and actor known as the King of Rock and Roll and is regarded as one of the most significant cultural figures of the 20th century. Can't Help Falling in Love was recorded by Elvis Presley for his fourth soundtrack album, Blue Hawaii, 1961. That's kind of early, isn't it? It was written by Hugo Peretti, Luigi Creatore, and George David Weiss. The melody is based on Plaisir d'amour, a popular French love song composed in 1784 by Jean-Paul Guy Martini. Well, that's going back a ways. The song was listed as one of the greatest songs of all time by Rolling Stone, ranking number 403 in the list's 2012 edition. Elvis Presley's version of the song topped the British charts in 1962, spending 4 weeks at number 1. The single is certified platinum by the RIAA for US sales in excess of 1 million copies. This idea of taking of basing it on Plaisir d'amour, I mean, 1784. We're going back to the classical era. This is the core of the classical era, and so this is going to be an interesting, shall we say, cover? Rewrite? I don't know. Let's find out what it is.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you.
Let me just say right up front, his voice is much different than I imagined. Thinking of him as king of rock and roll, I imagined more of a, shall I say, rock-sounding voice, and perhaps he goes there. But he also has this very lyrical, lovely baritone voice, doesn't he? And he's giving the full warmth of his voice here at the opening. Very nice.
Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so
I guess that little that little guitar pluck is maybe the first clue that this might have anything to do with rock music at all. Because everything I've heard up to now could have been a classical or blues or even gospel. Well, there's that little bit of brush-sounding drum in there, but it's so subtle. And you have the vocal chorus backing him. You have his full baritone voice. You don't have anything to really place it as a rock song. I'm not saying that rock doesn't have this kind of voice in it. One that's coming to mind right now is Jim Morrison. You know, he also had this big, full voice that he did use. But what I'm saying is, it's not an identifying element of rock music, and it's something that you hear in many musical genres, much older than rock. So it doesn't make me pin it down as a rock style. But then that little warped guitar note, dwee, dwee, suddenly I felt that this was beginning to be placed in a certain context, just by that one little tiny note.
Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you, for I can't help falling in love with you.
That's really a beautiful, beautiful cover, performance, reworking of that song, of that melody. Well, his voice here kind of makes me think of what I associate with the first half of the 20th century radio TV style of singing. You could even say Frank Sinatra style voice. And the presentation of that, you can picture it in old black and white movies. You can imagine it in a Christmas broadcast. It's a very, shall I say, familiar style of singing. But there are some things I appreciate about how he handled this song. And I'm slightly amused by this, because the whole song is, wise men say only fools rush in. And the premise is that you shouldn't just fall in love hastily. What has he done with his voice? He is not rushing in. He is taking every fraction of a second, working his way through each note, each part of each note, and taking the time moving through the piece. It never moved very quickly. It didn't drag. It was very well paced. Now, I want to talk about this, what I say is a very familiar voice, at least to me. I mentioned Jim Morrison. There might be a couple others, but I can't bring them to mind right now as far as in the rock genre. Some of you, I understand, don't love vibrato in singing, at least not very much. And so I was listening to his vibrato and I was thinking, you know, at this point in the history of popular music, where we are now and all that we've heard through the decades up till now, there's been a lot of straight singing. There's been a lot of other kinds of voices. I'm curious how many of you are bothered by his vibrato. I'm very curious. Not because I have anything one way or the other, whether you like it or not. I like it personally, but I come from a different background. And to me, his handling of vibrato feels very controlled, very unobtrusive. You hear some singers and their voices are wobbling like this, and you think, all right, how many notes are you singing right now? 2, 3, 5? What's your range here? Can we just narrow it down a little bit? Presley doesn't do that. Presley keeps it very, very narrow, but not tense, not tight. And that is one of the things that makes this piece feel so nice when he handles it with his voice, because that gives a bit of warmth and feeling of flexibility. I could say generosity, actually. It gives a generous quality to his voice. But it's not so much that you feel like, all right, I'm in just some unendurable opera performance where the singer thinks that all there is about voice is how far can you wobble up and down. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because clearly his appeal was, and probably still is, massive. And I also need to check out some more Elvis to see whether he and how he handled his voice in other contexts, because this, of course, is a very historical ballad, shall we say. Of course, it's been reworked and arranged and all of that, but there is this feeling of a timeless quality to it. It's not a new style of music. It's not a new piece of music. So it's kind of an easy way in for me if I'm going to be testing out an Elvis piece. And I'm kind of eager to test out some more, because now that I've tasted his voice, I am incredibly curious to see how does he handle it in various contexts. He has a lot of voice there that can be handled, and I'm curious to see how he does it and where he goes with it, and get more familiar with that at this point in my journey. So there we have Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley. And maybe I should look and see if I can find a recording of the original French melody. If I can find one, maybe I'll have Vlad put a link so that you can see where this came from and maybe compare the two. That would be kind of a fun project. So, very enjoyable. Took me by surprise. With the title King of Rock and Roll, I was expecting something perhaps a little more rock and roll. So, piqued my curiosity. And I'll be hearing more of him in the future. I'll see you all soon.